The sun hung low over the jagged Afghan valley, casting long shadows that danced across the dusty terrain. Lieutenant David Rourke's SEAL team moved cautiously along the dirt path, the crunch of their boots swallowed by the eerie silence that had settled over the canyon. Normally, the valley would hum with distant chatter, birds, goats, or even the faint murmur of villagers, but today it was like the world had exhaled and disappeared. Rourke, a seasoned operator who had survived 3 tours, scanned the cliffs on either side. His instincts screamed caution. "Eyes sharp," he muttered over the comms. The team responded with subtle nods, their fingers hovering over triggers, eyes slicing through the shadows. Their mission seemed straightforward: extract an informant hiding in a cave further down the valley, someone who claimed to have critical intel on an insurgent weapons pipeline threatening NATO forces. Simple, clean, and tactical. But the valley had other plans. Without warning, the world erupted in fire. A roadside IED detonated beneath the lead vehicle, throwing it into the air like a rag doll. Flames licked the metal, smoke curling into a thick black pillar that blotted out the fading sun. The blast threw Rourke and his men to the ground. Dust, shrapnel, and the acrid stench of burning fuel filled their lungs. The world became a blur of chaos, screams, and gunfire. "Contact front, multiple hostiles," yelled Rourke, struggling to regain his footing. The SEALs scrambled for cover behind the overturned Humvee, their training kicking in instinctively. Bullets slammed into metal and rock around them. The cliffside erupted with gunfire, shadows flitting across the dusty air. The valley had become a death trap. Their comms crackled, attempting to call for reinforcements, but the mountains seemed to swallow their voices. "We're pinned. We need immediate QRF." One of the younger SEALs shouted into the radio, desperation dripping from his voice. Static answered. Then almost impossibly another voice cut through, calm, steely. "QRF is 20 minutes out. Hold your positions. I'm coming to you." The SEALs froze. None of them recognized the voice. Not from HQ, not from their support teams. It was neither commanding nor hesitant. It was certain. There was an edge to it, a weight that implied the speaker was no ordinary soldier. Rourke scanned the ridge lines, the canyon mouth, the surrounding cliffs. No sign of anyone approaching. His gut tightened. "Did anyone else hear that?" he muttered. "Yeah, and did you notice how calm they were?" replied Petty Officer Alvarez, his eyes narrowing. "The bullets didn't stop. The insurgents had them pinned like rats in a cage, their fire precise and terrifyingly methodical. Smoke from the burning Humvee rose, mingling with the desert dust, making visibility almost impossible. The SEALs' radio crackled again. "This is not a drill. Hold your position. Reinforcements will be delayed. You are on your own until they arrive," the mysterious voice repeated. A tense silence fell over the SEALs. The clarity of the voice was unsettling. There was no hesitation, no panic, just raw confidence. They exchanged glances, reading each other's minds. Who is this? How are they coming? Rourke's mind raced. He'd trained with some of the best operators in the world. He'd seen men die, entire missions fail. But the tone of that voice, it was the kind of voice that made you believe miracles were possible. Then a shadow moved. Far on the ridge, barely visible, a lone figure was advancing. Dust rose from the slope with each step, blending into the desert haze. The SEALs froze, weapons raised, hearts pounding. Whoever this was had no backup. One person, against the overwhelming force that had trapped them. Rourke felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary soldier. This was someone who had faced death before and had not only survived but thrived. The kind of person legends whispered about in briefings and bar rooms, but never actually saw in the flesh. The insurgents below, unaware of the figure on the ridge, continued to tighten their circle. A machine gun rattled off rounds, ricocheting near the SEALs. Explosions from the Humvee's burning fuel sent shrapnel flying, embedding in the earth around them. The SEALs moved with precision, returning fire, but the sheer number of hostiles made their survival feel precarious. Then came a moment that froze everyone in place. Through the smoke, the lone figure on the ridge raised a rifle with the calm, deliberate movements of someone who had done this countless times. She didn't hesitate. She didn't fumble. She became part of the landscape, a shadow within shadows. Rourke's heart raced. Who is that?" he whispered. The SEALs had no answer. None of them had seen her before, yet in that moment hope sparked. Bullets zipped past the figure on the ridge, but she moved with uncanny precision, seemingly predicting every shot. The SEALs ducked, firing sporadically, but now their pin position didn't feel quite so hopeless. "Hang on," she called out, her voice carrying effortlessly over the valley, calm and commanding. "I've got this." Rourke exchanged looks with his men. In the heat of the moment, amidst smoke, fire, and death, a single thought crystallized. Maybe we'll make it. Maybe this person, this ghost, will pull us through. But as the sun sank lower, painting the valley blood-red, the SEALs knew the worst wasn't over. The insurgents were still everywhere, their numbers far greater than expected. Every second that passed made escape harder, survival slimmer. The valley had claimed many, and it wouldn't release them easily. And yet, against all odds, a single figure moved with lethal grace toward them. One person, alone. Against the storm, 2 miles away, the rugged terrain was quiet in comparison to the chaos unfolding in the valley below. Dust swirled along goat trails, kicked up by the late afternoon wind. The smell of dry earth and the faint tang of metal from abandoned vehicles lingered in the air. On a narrow, jagged path, Staff Sergeant Riley Hale, call sign Hawk, revved the engine of her ATV, each rev a warning to the silent cliffs around her. Riley was alone. She wasn't supposed to be. Her small Army Ranger detachment had been assigned to a nearby objective, and she had been tasked with support, not frontline engagement. Yet, hours earlier, she had intercepted a garbled transmission, shouts, gunfire, and the unmistakable sound of men in mortal danger. Somewhere down in the valley, a SEAL team was pinned, possibly surrounded. Her gut had made the decision before her mind could argue. Riley's fingers tightened around the throttle as the ATV's wheels ground against the rocky trail. The sun slanted across the cliffs, casting a golden haze that mingled with dust, making the jagged edges of the rocks look like ghostly figures. Every step, every turn reminded her of the valley's history, the valley that had claimed one of her closest friends during her last deployment. She hadn't come back here for closure. She had come back to ensure that history didn't repeat itself. As she reached a ridge overlooking the trapped SEALs, Riley dismounted, her boots crunching over loose stones. The distant crack of gunfire and the occasional burst of automatic fire echoed across the canyon. Smoke and dust blurred the edges of her vision, yet her eyes pierced through, focusing on the chaos below. Her comms crackled. "Hale, do not enter that kill zone alone. Repeat, do not." Riley muted the radio with a flick of her finger, the signal slicing through the tension like a paper cut. She had heard enough orders in her career to know that sometimes protocol was a luxury when lives were on the line. The SEALs were in a death trap. Any hesitation and they would be annihilated. Any mistake and the valley would claim another team. She had faced impossible odds before, and Riley knew one truth. Some missions required a lone wolf. Some missions required her. She crouched behind a rocky outcrop, surveying the landscape. The SEALs were pinned behind a burning Humvee, muzzle flashes illuminating the smoke and casting distorted shadows. Enemy fighters moved like shadows themselves, scaling the cliffs, moving in precise, deadly formations. From her vantage point, Riley could see every movement, every heartbeat of the enemy's strategy. Her own heartbeat thundered in her ears, but beneath it was calm. The kind of calm that only comes from experience, the calm that comes from facing death and staring it down without flinching. Riley's mind flickered briefly to memories of her fallen teammate, the one she had lost 2 years ago in this very valley. The cliffs, the dust, the winds, they all whispered reminders of failure, of what she had lost. She exhaled slowly, pushing the ghosts aside. Today would be different. Today, she would save lives. Moving swiftly but silently, she ascended the ridge that gave her a clear line of sight to the seals. Her rifle was secured, optics adjusted, fingers caressing the trigger in preparation. She had practiced this exact scenario countless times: long-range engagement, precision shots, surgical strikes. But the stakes were real now, and they were terrifyingly close. From below, she could hear shouts. The SEALs were trying to organize, returning fire where possible, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of options. Each passing second threatened to become their last. Riley scanned the ridges and valleys. Enemy combatants were closing in from all sides, but she spotted something crucial: a weak flank in their formation, a blind spot the SEALs hadn't noticed. A single operator could exploit it, if she moved carefully, calculated perfectly. Her eyes narrowed. It's now or never. She rose slowly, rifle raised, and squeezed off the first round. The crack echoed across the canyon. A hostile combatant collapsed instantly. Below, the SEALs looked up, shocked. Their jaws tightened, disbelief evident in their eyes. Riley didn't stop. Another shot, another enemy down. Precision after precision, surgical, unstoppable. Yet with every successful hit, she became more visible. The insurgents began to notice the death raining down from above. Bullets zipped past her position. Rocks exploded around her feet. But Riley moved like water, flowing from one cover to another, her instincts honed by countless missions, countless engagements where hesitation meant death. And then, in the midst of the chaos, something remarkable happened. Riley didn't just neutralize threats, she began shaping the battlefield. The insurgents, confused by the sudden, surgical elimination of their comrades, faltered. Their formations broke. The SEALs, inspired by the invisible hand guiding the fight, regained their composure. Still, Riley knew this was far from over. For every threat she eliminated, there were two more waiting, closing in. Her ammunition was limited. Her exposure was growing. The terrain offered little sanctuary, and reinforcements were still 20 minutes away, if they even arrived at all. But Riley's gaze hardened. She had learned long ago that fear was a tool, not a master. She had survived ambushes, betrayals, and firefights that would have crushed ordinary soldiers. And now, as shadows stretched across the valley floor and the first hints of evening bathed the cliffs in blood-red light, she knew she was the SEALs' only chance. Suddenly, a mortar screamed from the cliff opposite her perch. She dove behind a rock, the ground shaking beneath her, pebbles and dust embedding themselves into her uniform. Riley's breath came fast but controlled. Her eyes scanned the valley below. The SEALs flinched with every explosion, but they hadn't lost hope yet. She adjusted her position, firing again with deadly accuracy. One by one, the enemy combatants fell. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, precise. And yet, she knew that each success brought her closer to being discovered, closer to facing the full fury of the insurgents. And then she saw it, a hidden cave entrance on the far side of the valley, partially obscured by boulders and dust. She realized the SEALs' informant was likely inside. The insurgents were using it as a staging point. If they could be neutralized there, the team would have a chance to escape. Riley's heart raced, not with fear but with the awareness of the stakes. This wasn't just about completing a mission. This was about saving lives, her own and those she didn't even know. She muttered under her breath, a promise more than a plan. "We're getting out of this, all of us." But then the moment of clarity hit. Her position had been compromised. Dust shifted above her, a sniper's glint reflected in the fading sun. The enemy was moving to flank her. The ridge that had offered her a vantage point was now a trap, and the margin for error had evaporated. Riley exhaled, her mind calculating. Options were few. Time was even shorter. Yet she felt an odd, unshakable calm settle over her. A familiar sensation, the calm before the storm, when life and death hang in balance and only skill, courage, and willpower decide the outcome. And then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in blood red and gold, Riley Hale rose from cover, ready to become the unknown guardian angel the SEALs desperately needed. Riley Hale crouched behind a jagged rock, her rifle pressed against her shoulder, breathing steady despite the chaos surrounding the valley. From her perch high above, the SEAL team was pinned behind the burning Humvee, their movements frantic, restrained by the hail of enemy fire. Every second stretched longer than the last, each heartbeat echoing in Riley's ears. She adjusted her optics, the magnified lens bringing the enemy positions into sharp focus. The insurgents moved in coordinated bursts, flanking the SEALs, shifting in patterns that betrayed experience but not invincibility. Riley's eyes flicked from target to target, calculating trajectories, wind speed, and distance. She had done this countless times before, but never under such raw pressure. A team of elite SEALs counting on her alone, pinned in a valley with no reinforcements in sight. A slight shift in the dust below caught her attention. A man broke cover, moving to adjust a machine gun aimed directly at the SEALs. Riley exhaled slowly, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the world around her. One shot, one chance. The rifle cracked. The enemy gunner collapsed, hitting the ground with a muffled thud that was almost swallowed by the chaos around him. One down. Riley didn't pause. Another enemy appeared, shouting, gesturing, signaling others. The SEALs below caught glimpses of the sniper above, but didn't yet know who or what was keeping them alive. Riley adjusted her position, moving fluidly from one rock to another. She became part of the ridge, shadows blending with dust and sunlight, a ghost moving among ghosts. Another shot, and another enemy fell. The SEALs stared up, incredulous. They had trained to face danger, but what they saw defied belief. A single figure, alone, taking down hostile combatants with deadly precision, systematically dismantling the ambush that had trapped them. Rourke, crouched behind the Humvee, shouted into the smoke-filled air, "Who the hell is up there?" No answer came, just another crack of the rifle. The insurgents began to notice the threat. Bullets zipped past Riley, kicking up dust at her feet. A sniper on the opposite ridge took a crack at her, the bullet embedding itself into stone inches from her head. She rolled, moved, fired. Precision, calm, unstoppable. But each victory came with consequences. Her position was being compromised. The enemy began shifting formations, trying to locate her perch, to neutralize the unseen force systematically dismantling their plan. Riley's mind worked in rapid cycles: assess, calculate, execute. She spotted an insurgent carrying a radio, likely coordinating the attack. Taking him out would disrupt enemy communication. She steadied her aim, exhaled, and fired. The man dropped mid-step, the radio clattering against the rocks. A brief silence fell over the valley below, broken only by the crackle of fire and distant explosions. The SEALs looked around at one another, a mixture of relief and awe washing over their faces. They still had enemies closing in, but now they could breathe, just enough to regroup, just enough to survive. Riley didn't have that luxury. Her position was compromised and movement was risky. She could see more insurgents scaling a cliff face to flank her. Each step they took brought them closer to discovering her perch. She calculated the odds. Her ammunition was limited and exposure was increasing. Yet turning back was not an option. The SEALs' lives depended on her. Another target moved. A young insurgent, barely out of his teens, ran across an open patch to flank the SEALs. Riley tracked him through her optics, waited for the perfect moment, and squeezed the trigger. A single shot, precise and fatal. The young man collapsed, his movement halted before he could threaten the team below. Below, Rourke's team caught sight of her shadowed figure on the ridge for the first time. For a brief moment, disbelief and awe silenced them. Then realization hit. This woman, this lone operator, was keeping them alive. Rourke's voice was barely audible over the gunfire. "Keep it together. We're not dead yet because of her." Riley didn't hear him, she couldn't. Focus consumed her. Every shot had to count. Every movement had to be perfect. Each second, each bullet was a line in a story that only she could write. Then came the mortar. The first shell screamed from a hidden tube on the opposite ridge. The concussion knocked Riley off her perch, sand and rock exploding around her. Her rifle jolted, but her hand steadied it immediately. Heart racing, sweat and dust clinging to her skin, she assessed the threat. The mortars were aimed to flush her out of the ridge, but she wouldn't move blindly. Not now. Not when the lives of elite SEALs were in her hands. Riley shifted her angle, adjusting for wind and elevation, and fired again. Another enemy fell before they even realized what had struck them. Below, the SEALs were scrambling for a better firing position, inspired by the sudden shift in momentum. Hope had returned, fragile but real. Yet Riley knew she was painting a target on herself. The enemy was closing in, flanking both her and the SEALs, and reinforcements were still 20 minutes away if they even arrived. The dust, the smoke, the chaos, it all worked against her, but her experience told her this. The fight wasn't about numbers. It was about precision, timing, and willpower. Her next targets were moving into a cave, likely the position where the SEAL's informant was being held, or the insurgents' command post for the ambush. Riley's mind calculated the angle, the trajectory, the timing. She had only a few seconds to act before more enemies flooded the valley. One by one, she picked off hostiles with meticulous care. Shots rang sharp and deadly. Another insurgent fell, then another. Below, the SEALs began to move cautiously, inspired by the sudden advantage. Their pinned position had turned into a lifeline, all because of her. But then came the realization. Each successful hit brought her closer to exposure. The insurgents were now aware of the threat above, the ghost sniper dismantling their strategy. They began scanning the cliffs, moving deliberately, closing in, ready to engage. Riley's calm began to mingle with tension. Her solitude, once an advantage, was now a liability. She adjusted her scope, taking careful aim at another approaching enemy. One shot, one chance. The mantra repeated in her mind, familiar and grounding. She squeezed the trigger. A man collapsed mid-step, another neutralized before he could signal his team. The SEALs began noticing patterns in the chaos below. The ambush that had seemed impenetrable was unraveling. Each insurgent eliminated forced the others into defensive maneuvers, slowing their advance, buying precious time. Rourke peered through the smoke and dust, whispering to himself, "Whoever that is, she's incredible." Riley's focus, however, could not waver. One misstep, one miss, and the SEALs would be back in mortal danger. She could see the insurgents repositioning, trying to find her exact location. The ridge, once her advantage, was now perilous. Her ammunition was dwindling. She had to move to maintain the tactical upper hand, but any movement increased risk. And then she saw it. A shadow moving just beyond the ridge, a potential flank attempting to bypass her. Riley's eyes narrowed. Her rifle became an extension of her body, a conduit of precision and intent. She fired, neutralizing the threat instantly. The SEALs below looked up once more, their expressions a mixture of awe, disbelief, and gratitude. They had survived the initial ambush, and now, under the unseen guardian angel above, they had a chance to fight back. But Riley knew better than anyone. The fight was far from over. The valley was still alive with threats, and every second that passed brought new dangers. She exhaled, recalibrated, and prepared for the next wave. Riley's position has been compromised. Bullets now whistle dangerously close, mortars have targeted her ridge, and enemy reinforcements are converging. She's outnumbered, exposed, but one shot at a time, she continues to defy death. The SEAL's lives hang on her next move. The first mortar screamed over the ridge, screaming a deathly warning as it arched across the valley like a malevolent hawk. Riley Hale dove behind a crumbling rock wall, dust and pebbles exploding around her with each impact. Her ears rang, but her mind was razor-sharp. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat was precious. Below, the SEALs flinched, momentarily frozen in fear, thinking their unseen savior had been struck down. Riley peered over the wall, eyes scanning rapidly. The enemy was closing in, emboldened by the mortar salvo. They had figured out there was a sniper above, and their flanking maneuvers had become more aggressive. She could see men scaling the cliffs, carrying rifles, grenades, and mortars. Every angle of escape seemed blocked, but Riley had learned long ago that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Calm and precision were the weapons she wielded best. The valley below was chaos incarnate. Smoke from the burning Humvee swirled around the SEALs, mixing with the dust kicked up by the enemy's approach. Rourke barked orders, trying to reorganize his team, but bullets kicked up the dirt at their feet, a constant reminder that death was inches away. The young operators looked to the ridge, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some of them had glimpsed the silhouette of Riley moving fluidly across rocks and ridges, and every time she fired, another enemy fell. Riley knew that despite the temporary advantage, the SEALs' situation was critical. She could see them pinned behind the Humvee, trying to move toward a safer position. But the insurgents had established crossfire, blocking every path. If she didn't act, they would be slaughtered. Her mind worked through the possibilities. Direct engagement would expose her position. Moving to a new vantage point risked death. But she had no choice. She had to disrupt the enemy's plan without becoming a target herself. Taking a deep breath, Riley slid along the edge of the ridge, firing precision shots at the enemy leaders orchestrating the attack. Two fell, instantly disorienting the hostile forces. Below, Rourke noticed the sudden shift in the enemy's behavior. He shouted to his team, "Fall back toward the left flank, cover each other, move." The SEALs began inching toward a narrow section of the valley, using the terrain to shield themselves from crossfire. Riley's actions had bought them precious seconds, but she wasn't done yet. A sudden roar erupted from the cliffs above. Another mortar tube had been spotted, targeting her ridge. Riley's pulse quickened. This time, the threat was personal. She slid down a jagged incline, narrowly avoiding shrapnel as the explosive detonated nearby. Dust and rocks filled the air, stinging her eyes, scratching her arms. Riley gritted her teeth. She had trained for this, the perfect storm of danger, but now she felt the raw edge of reality. One misstep and she would become another casualty in the valley. As she moved to a safer position, she caught sight of insurgents attempting to flank her from the left. Without hesitation, she raised her rifle, took careful aim, and neutralized the first attacker before he could reach her. Another two fell in quick succession. Her calmness in the face of near-impossible odds was astonishing, a force of nature that seemed untouchable. But the mortars kept coming. Explosions shook the ground, sending pebbles and debris into the SEALs' position. Rourke yelled, ducking behind the Humvee as the operators scrambled for cover. The youngest member of the team froze, eyes wide with terror, and Riley's voice cut through the chaos. "Move now, fall back to the ravine." Her voice, commanding and unwavering, gave them the courage to act. The SEALs began a carefully coordinated retreat, using the cover of smoke and the disoriented insurgents to their advantage. Riley stayed behind, covering their movement, picking off enemies one by one with deadly accuracy. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Riley's figure moved like a shadow among shadows, each shot precise, each movement calculated. Her presence had shifted the battle, turning what seemed like certain death for the SEALs into a fight with hope, a chance to survive. But danger still loomed. One of the insurgents had spotted her movements and fired a round from a concealed position. The bullet tore through the rock near her head, sending a shower of sparks and dust into her face. Riley's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She rolled, adjusted her angle, and fired back, eliminating the sniper with a single, clean shot. The SEALs below noticed the enemy momentum faltering. With renewed hope, they moved toward a narrow ravine that offered some cover. Rourke's voice echoed through the valley, "Keep moving, you're almost there." Riley knew that the narrow ravine was their only chance. If they could reach it, the insurgents' ability to attack would be severely limited. But the path was dangerous, littered with enemy fighters and traps. She had to lead the way, draw fire, and ensure the SEALs could escape unscathed. Sliding down the ridge with the precision of a seasoned operator, Riley fired continuously, targeting key threats to maintain a corridor of safety. The insurgents, now aware of her lethal efficiency, were growing desperate. Their movements became erratic, less coordinated, more dangerous, but also more predictable. One by one, Riley dismantled their attempts to cut off the SEALs. A sudden explosion rocked the valley floor. One of the enemy's mortars landed dangerously close. Shrapnel embedded in the ground near Riley's feet, but she continued, relentless. Her eyes scanned the terrain, seeking the next threat, calculating distance, trajectory, and timing in microseconds. Finally, the SEALs reached the edge of the ravine, their formation tightening, using the natural cover to shield themselves from crossfire. Rourke's gaze flicked upward, searching for the sniper who had saved their lives. He caught a glimpse of her silhouette, moving fluidly across the rocks, firing with calm precision. Who is that?" one of the operators whispered, awe and disbelief in his voice. Riley didn't pause to answer. She had one more task before the team could be considered safe: clear the remaining threats near the ravine entrance. She crouched, adjusted her aim, and fired, each shot striking its mark. The insurgents were finally starting to retreat, their morale shattered by the relentless precision of the lone operator above. But Riley knew the battle was far from over. Every kill drew attention. The enemy's remaining forces were converging, determined to take her out. She could see them moving, coordinating their next attack, trying to trap her in the valley. Reinforcements were still not on the way. The SEALs' QRF was delayed by the ongoing sandstorm, grounding helicopters and delaying ground teams. Riley exhaled, steadying herself, knowing that her next move would determine the survival of everyone in the valley. She had bought time, disrupted the enemy, and saved lives, but the enemy wasn't finished yet. And then she spotted something critical: a hidden cave entrance, partially obscured by boulders and dust, likely the insurgents' command point, or worse, the location where the SEALs' informant was being held. The enemy had fortified it, but if she could reach it and neutralize the threats inside, the team's escape would be secured. Her pulse quickened. She adjusted her rifle, checked her ammunition, and prepared to move. One step at a time, one precise action at a time, she would take the fight to the enemy. Riley is exposed to multiple threats as she prepares to assault the cave entrance, a hidden enemy stronghold. Mortars, flanking insurgents, and limited ammo threaten to overwhelm her, but she is the only chance the SEALs have of surviving. The valley hangs on the edge of chaos, and her next move will decide the fate of every life in the canyon. Riley Hale crouched at the edge of the hidden cave entrance, the air thick with dust and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, revealing jagged rock walls and a narrow passageway that sloped downward into near-complete darkness. Somewhere beyond, the SEALs were trapped, their voices faint through the layers of stone and rock. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from the raw awareness of what lay ahead. Every step would bring her closer to them, and closer to certain danger. She adjusted her rifle strap, switching to a silencer to minimize noise. One misstep in the cave could mean instant death, not just for her but for the SEALs relying on her. She moved forward slowly, boots crunching on loose gravel, fingers brushing the jagged walls. The tunnel smelled of earth and sweat, with the faint tang of explosives lurking in the shadows. Riley paused. Years of experience told her this wasn't a simple passage. It was a trap. Pressure-sensitive devices, tripwires, and rigged explosives were all possibilities in such a strategic location. She crouched low, scanning for wires or irregularities in the stone floor, her flashlight off to preserve the element of surprise. Every sound amplified in the tunnel: the drip of water, the shuffle of her boots, the faint murmur of distant voices. The SEALs' shouts were clearer now, punctuated by gunfire and muffled explosions. She could hear them coordinating, trying to stay alive under relentless enemy pressure. She had to reach them before the insurgents closed in, before the traps could claim any lives. Riley moved forward, each step deliberate, her body tense like a coiled spring. Then she spotted a thin wire stretched across the tunnel, almost invisible in the dim light. A pressure-sensitive explosive, no doubt intended to kill anyone who tried to advance. Her heart remained calm, she had faced worse. Kneeling, she carefully disarmed the device, her hands steady, breath controlled. One spark sizzled and faded, and the trap was neutralized. She continued deeper, inching forward through the narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. The walls pressed close, dust falling with every movement. Her senses heightened. Any sound, a whisper, a shift of weight could mean enemy presence. And then she heard it, muffled footsteps behind her, shadows creeping closer. Insurgents. They had followed her into the tunnel, likely flanking her from the hidden entrance. She froze, waiting, calculating. One wrong move and she'd be ambushed, trapped between the approaching enemies and the SEALs further down. Riley slid into a side alcove, rifle raised, eyes scanning the approaching shadows. The first enemy appeared, a man moving cautiously, scanning for threats. She fired once, silently but lethally. He crumpled to the ground before he could react. Another moved in, and she dispatched him with the precision of someone born for this kind of chaos. The tunnel was no longer just a path, it was a battleground. The sound of her suppressed rifle echoed off the walls, a ghostly rhythm of life and death. The insurgents were relentless, pressing forward, and Riley realized the SEALs' lives depended entirely on her ability to neutralize these threats before they could reach them. Then she saw the final obstacle, a pressure-sensitive mine chamber, blocking the tunnel like a gate to the underworld. Beyond it, she could hear the SEALs' voices more clearly, but she had only moments to act. Her options were limited. Attempt to disarm the mine under extreme stress, risking triggering it, or retreat and potentially allow the insurgents to close in. Riley exhaled and moved carefully, her fingers brushing the wires, her mind racing through calculations she had performed countless times in training. She cut the correct wire, and the device fell silent. A faint vibration in the stone told her the threat was neutralized, at least for now. She moved into the chamber, aware of every creak, every shift in the stone ceiling. The enemy was still behind her, but she could sense the hesitation now. The traps had slowed them, given her the advantage. Finally, she reached the SEALs' side of the tunnel. Relief flickered across their faces as she emerged from the shadows, weapon ready, eyes scanning every inch of the passage. "Who the hell are you?" Rourke whispered, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "No time," Riley replied, her voice calm but urgent. "We move now, follow me." The SEALs hesitated for a moment, but the urgency in her tone pushed them into action. They formed a tight formation behind her, each man trusting her instincts, her skill, and her lethal efficiency. Riley led them through the tunnel, clearing obstacles and threats with the same calculated precision she had used to reach them. Each step was measured, each shot deliberate. She became a moving barrier, absorbing the enemy's attention while the SEALs moved safely behind her. But danger was never far away. The insurgents, realizing their trap had been breached, were now converging on the tunnel entrance, attempting to seal off the passage. Riley could hear their shouts, the clatter of boots on rock and the scrape of weapons against stone. She knew time was running out. As they advanced, another hidden explosive triggered, this one a timer-based charge placed to collapse the tunnel and trap anyone inside. Riley's eyes snapped to it, calculating distance, trajectory, and timing. With seconds to spare, she slammed her shoulder into a weak section of wall, dislodging debris and creating a passage for the SEALs. Rocks tumbled behind them, and the explosive detonated, shaking the tunnel and sending dust and rubble everywhere. The team emerged into a small cavern at the tunnel's end, hearts pounding, breathing heavy, and adrenaline surging. For a moment, There was silence, broken only by the sound of dust settling and distant shouts of the enemy searching the tunnel behind them. Rourke looked at Riley, astonishment written across his face. You saved us, all of us." Riley didn't answer. She scanned the cavern, knowing this was far from over. The seals were alive, yes, but the valley above still held threats, and the insurgents would regroup, push back, and strike again if given the chance. Her hand instinctively went to her rifle, eyes narrowing as she spotted movement at the far end of the cavern. Shadows shifted, enemies still lurking, ready to ambush anyone who tried to escape. Riley knew she had to act fast. "Form up, move quickly, watch your angles," she commanded, her voice sharp and precise. The seals obeyed instantly, their trust in her absolute. They moved cautiously through the cavern, each step a careful dance between life and death. Riley led the way, checking for booby traps, clearing threats, and guiding the team toward the valley floor. Every second was a test of nerves, skill, and courage. Finally, they reached an opening, a narrow exit that would allow the seals to rejoin safer terrain outside the tunnel. But the insurgents were waiting. They had anticipated the escape and had flanked the opening, ready to ambush. Riley froze for a moment, calculating the approach. Mortars, gunfire, and insurgent forces all converged on the exit. She knew that without her intervention, the seals would be trapped once more. Her hands gripped her rifle, her eyes scanning every angle, her mind running through every possible tactical maneuver. She whispered to herself, "One shot, one chance." Riley Hale emerged into the narrow tunnel exit, her boots crunching over the rocky terrain as she scanned the surrounding cliffs. The seals followed closely behind, their faces pale, hearts pounding, and bodies tense from adrenaline. Outside, the valley stretched out like a beast lying in wait. Dust swirled in the dying sunlight, smoke from the Humvee drifting lazily into the evening sky. But the insurgents had regrouped. From both ridges flanking the tunnel exit, hostile forces had positioned themselves for a deadly ambush. Mortars were ready to launch, and rifles trained on the chokepoint. The seals froze instinctively, realizing that the moment they stepped out of the cavern, death awaited. Every option seemed to vanish into the jagged cliffs. Riley knelt briefly, her eyes darting across the battlefield. The enemy's formations were coordinated, almost prescient. They had clearly studied the valley, predicting every retreat, every advance. The seals' QRF was still delayed, grounded by the sandstorm further up the valley. They were trapped, pinned, and every second brought the enemy closer to annihilation. Riley exhaled slowly. She had faced impossible odds before, but this was an entire valley against her and a handful of operators. The seals were relying on her, and for the first time in a long while, Riley felt the crushing weight of responsibility. If she failed here, every life in the canyon could be lost. She motioned for the team to stay low. "Listen to me carefully. Follow my lead. Every move you make counts. One slip, one hesitation, and it's over." The seals nodded, their trust implicit. They had seen her in action, how she had dismantled the ambush, neutralized enemies with surgical precision, and navigated the booby-trapped tunnels. Now, they were about to follow her into what seemed like certain death. Riley's eyes caught the first movement. A mortar tube angled directly at the exit, with insurgents ready to fire. With no cover in sight, there was no room for hesitation. She fired a single round, silencing the gunner instantly. The enemy faltered, stunned that a lone operator could dismantle their opening salvo so effectively. The seals took the cue and began advancing, staying close to Riley, using the terrain for partial cover. But more threats emerged. Riflemen on the ridge above, another mortar tube primed to launch, and insurgents moving through the rubble-strewn valley floor. Every step forward increased the risk exponentially. Riley knew the key to survival was chaos, disrupting the enemy's coordination, keeping them off balance long enough for the seals to move. She fired, took cover, moved, and repeated. Every shot was calculated, precise, deadly. The insurgents, now desperate, began to scatter, but they were still coordinated enough to pose a serious threat. Then came the sound that made Riley's blood run cold, the telltale click of a tripwire near the cliff edge. A secondary explosive, likely placed to cover the insurgents' retreat route, had been triggered. A massive blast would obliterate the exit if not dealt with immediately. Time collapsed. Riley had less than 3 seconds to act. She dove toward the wire, sliding across the rocks, rifle clutched tightly. Her body slammed into a small outcropping, the wire snapping harmlessly beneath her weight. She rolled, firing at an insurgent who had been advancing behind it. The man crumpled silently. The SEALs followed, awestruck by her speed, bravery, and precision. They had never seen anyone move like this, not even among elite operators. Riley led them, channeling their fear into action, guiding them past the deadly trap and back into slightly safer terrain. But safety was fleeting. Another enemy unit had appeared at the valley's narrow ridge exit. Snipers had positioned themselves above, rifles glinting in the sunset. Riley ducked low, firing rapidly, taking out 2 before they could react. Bullets ricocheted around her, dust and rock exploding as the SEALs pressed closer to the exit. One of the young SEALs stumbled, tripping over loose rubble. Riley's hand shot out, grabbing his arm, yanking him back into cover. "Move, now," she barked, her voice a razor cutting through the chaos. Rourke, his face streaked with sweat and dust, scanned the battlefield. "We're almost there, guys. Hold it together. Don't stop. Don't hesitate." Riley's eyes locked on a group of insurgents attempting to flank the team from the right ridge. She calculated the distance, wind, and trajectory with deadly precision. One by one, they fell to her rifle. Her movements were a blend of instinct, training, and a cold, calculated resolve. She had become a force of nature, invisible yet devastatingly effective. Even so, the danger was multiplying. Another mortar tube had been set up at the far side of the valley, aimed to collapse the exit entirely. Riley's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline surging. She had seconds to act before it fired. Calculating the angle, she fired a precise shot that destroyed the tube's trigger mechanism, causing the explosive to misfire harmlessly into the dirt. The SEALs exhaled in unison, a collective breath of relief. For a moment, it seemed the valley might release its grip on them. But Riley's mind didn't allow for celebration. More enemy reinforcements were moving into position, determined to prevent their escape. Mortars, riflemen, and hand grenades threatened to pin them once again. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and every second that passed drew new threats closer. The SEALs' only option now was to move fast, rely entirely on Riley's guidance, and hope the QRF would arrive before the insurgents could regroup. Rourke signaled the team to follow Riley closely. Every step they took was measured, calculated, and coordinated with her precise instructions. Riley led them through the narrow valley floor, using every bit of terrain as cover, her rifle constantly scanning for threats. She dispatched enemies silently, efficiently, and without hesitation. Every movement had to count, because one mistake would spell death for the entire team. Suddenly, a grenade clattered onto the rocks just ahead of the team. Riley's reflexes kicked in instantly. She grabbed it with a gloved hand, tossing it back toward the enemy with deadly accuracy. The explosion ripped through the ridge, sending a shockwave of debris into the valley, taking out several hostile combatants in the blast. The SEALs froze momentarily, staring in awe. "Holy, did you see that?" one whispered. Riley didn't respond. She scanned the remaining threats, noticing the shadows of more insurgents advancing from the cliffs above. They were running low on options, trapped in a valley that had become a death sentence for anyone who hesitated. Her mind raced through contingencies. Every move had to be precise, every step calculated. There was no room for error. The SEALs' lives depended on it, and she knew it. Then she spotted movement farther down the valley, the outline of their extraction point, where QRF reinforcements could finally reach them. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't allow herself to relax. There were still enemies in their path, still threats lurking in every shadow. Riley adjusted her aim, took a deep breath, and prepared for the final push. The SEALs followed her lead, trusting entirely in her judgment, instincts, and lethal precision. They were moving towards salvation, but the valley had one final test waiting for them. The valley had become a crucible. Dust swirled around jagged rocks like ghostly spirits, mingling with smoke from the burning Humvee and the echoes of distant mortar fire. Riley Hale crouched behind a rock outcropping. The SEALs pressed closely behind her, each operator breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The extraction point was visible now, a small clearing beyond a rocky ridge. But the insurgents were converging, determined to stop them at all costs. Riley assessed the battlefield, her eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow, every movement. She was outnumbered, far outnumbered. But she had something the enemy did not: knowledge, precision, and the element of terror that her lethal efficiency had created. The insurgents had already learned that one person could dismantle their assault, and that fear was a weapon Riley wielded with deadly accuracy. "Listen up," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We make it to that clearing, we hold it, and we don't stop moving. Cover each other, trust your shots, and watch my back. Move on my signal." Rourke nodded, signaling the team to form a tight, cohesive unit behind her. The SEALs trusted her implicitly. They had seen her navigate impossible terrain, neutralize threats with surgical precision, and dismantle ambushes that would have crushed any ordinary operator. Now, they were counting on her to lead them through what seemed like a death sentence. The first wave of insurgents appeared, emerging from the ridge to their left. Riley raised her rifle and fired, 2 shots dropping enemy combatants instantly. Bullets kicked up dust at her feet as she rolled behind a rock for cover, eyes scanning for the next threat. Another round of insurgents advanced from the opposite side, forcing the team to split fire. Riley's movements were fluid, almost a dance. One moment she was firing, the next rolling to a new position, her eyes scanning for snipers, mortars, and flanking enemies. Each action was precise, each decision calculated to maximize survival. The SEALs followed her lead, covering angles and moving as one. Then came the unmistakable sound of mortar fire screaming overhead. Riley ducked instinctively as the first round slammed into the rocks near the tunnel exit, sending a shower of pebbles into the canyon floor. The concussion rattled her teeth, but she didn't flinch. She had no time for fear. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat counted. The SEALs pressed forward, using Riley's suppressive fire to inch closer to the clearing. She could see the extraction point just beyond the ridge, a helicopter landing zone where reinforcements would finally arrive. But the path was a gauntlet. Insurgents were entrenched in every shadow, waiting to cut them down. Riley scanned the valley, calculating every trajectory, every potential trap. She spotted a group of enemy fighters attempting to flank the team from the right ridge. Without hesitation, she took precise aim and fired, eliminating 2 before they could react. Another insurgent raised his rifle, and she neutralized him with a single, clean shot. The SEALs moved as one, inching closer to the extraction zone. But then the impossible happened. A squad of insurgents emerged from a side path, cutting them off and forcing Riley to make a split-second decision. There was no cover, no time to retreat, and the SEALs were exposed. Riley exhaled, her mind sharp and focused. This was it, the last stand. She raised her rifle and began a controlled burst of fire, dropping one enemy after another, buying precious seconds for the SEALs to maneuver. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, dust exploded around her, and smoke filled the air, creating a surreal battlefield where survival depended on skill and sheer willpower. The insurgents were relentless, closing in from multiple directions. Riley moved like a ghost, unseen yet deadly, her rifle an extension of her body. She dodged and fired, rolled and shot, each action a precise calculation of life and death. The SEALs pressed forward, inspired by her courage and efficiency, following her lead without hesitation. But the enemy wasn't done. From the ridge above, a sniper took a shot, the bullet narrowly missing Riley's head. She rolled to the side, firing back instinctively, taking down the sniper before he could adjust. Every threat neutralized was another step closer to survival, but her ammunition was dwindling. Rourke looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "How are you still standing?" he whispered, almost to himself. Riley didn't answer. She didn't have time for words. She had one mission: ensure the SEALs made it to the extraction point alive. Then came the final threat. A group of insurgents rushing directly toward the clearing, grenades in hand, ready to cut them down. Riley realized that their survival depended on a decisive, bold move. She shouted to the SEALs, "Cover me, I'll take the lead." They followed her instructions instantly, laying down suppressive fire while she charged forward, moving with unmatched speed and precision. She fired, rolled, ducked, and eliminated threats in her path, creating a corridor through which the SEALs could advance. Each shot was calculated, each movement precise, leaving no room for error. The insurgents faltered, disoriented by the sudden ferocity of her assault. Riley exploited the chaos, picking off the remaining enemies with surgical precision. The SEALs pressed forward, following her through the narrow corridor she had created. Finally, they reached the clearing. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the valley as the QRF arrived, descending like angels into the smoke-filled canyon. The SEALs rushed toward the extraction point, safety finally within reach. Riley stayed behind for a moment, scanning the ridges to ensure no enemy threats remained. Bullets kicked up around her and mortars exploded nearby, but she moved with unrelenting precision, covering the SEALs' final steps to safety. One by one, the operators boarded the helicopter, adrenaline still coursing through their veins, gratitude and disbelief etched on their faces. Rourke turned to Riley as the last SEAL climbed aboard. You saved us, all of us." Riley didn't answer. She was already moving, covering the perimeter, ensuring the insurgents didn't follow. Her focus was absolute. The extraction wasn't complete until the valley was secured. The helicopter lifted off, carrying the SEALs to safety. Riley remained behind for a few precious seconds, ensuring no threats remained. Then, finally, she retreated toward a safer position, dust and smoke swirling around her, the valley echoing with the aftermath of battle. She allowed herself a brief exhale, the weight of the battle pressing down. The SEALs were safe, alive because of her. But the valley had left its mark. Every step, every shot, every decision had tested her to the limit. As the helicopter disappeared into the distance, Riley stood alone amidst the rocks and dust, surveying the battlefield she had just conquered. Her body ached, her arms burned, but her mind was sharp, alive, and aware. The SEALs had survived and the insurgents had learned a harsh lesson. One person, moving with skill, precision, and courage, could change the outcome of war. Riley Hale disappears into the canyon, leaving behind a trail of stunned enemies and a team forever in her debt. But in the shadows, a new, even deadlier threat begins to observe her movements. The fight is over for the SEALs, but for Riley, the war is far from finished. The rotor wash of the helicopter faded into the distance, carrying the SEALs away from the valley and the chaos they had just survived. Riley Hale remained behind, crouched atop a jagged outcrop, surveying the battlefield with a hawk's precision. The dust hung in the air like smoke from a war long past, mingling with the scent of explosives and sweat. Every inch of the canyon told a story of death narrowly avoided, a war fought in silence, shadow, and instinct. Riley's rifle rested across her shoulder, the barrel still warm from the relentless fire she had unleashed. Her body ached, muscles burned, and a bruise blossomed along her ribs, but her mind was focused, clear, and unyielding. She allowed herself a brief glance at the valley below. The Humvee burned, insurgents' bodies scattered across the terrain, mortars destroyed, and the once impenetrable ambush reduced to ruin. The SEALs were alive because of her. Yet relief was a stranger. Riley had learned long ago that survival in war was fleeting. She scanned the ridges again, eyes sharp. Something moved, a shadow flitting across a distant rock face. At first she thought it was a trick of the dust and fading sunlight. But then it shifted again, deliberate, controlled, and unnervingly silent. Her instincts screamed. Another threat, more dangerous, more patient, and likely more lethal, was observing her from afar. The valley had not yet released her from its grip. Riley adjusted her rifle, scanning the ridges and cliffs with the precision that had saved a team of elite SEALs. She took a slow, deliberate breath. This was no ordinary insurgent. Whoever, or whatever, was out there had learned from the chaos she had wrought. They were watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and Riley knew that a single mistake could be fatal. She moved cautiously, blending into the shadows, every step deliberate, every muscle coiled for action. The canyon was her domain, but it was also a hunter's ground now. The predator was patient, and Riley had only instinct and training to guide her. As night fell, the temperature dropped, carrying with it an eerie silence broken only by the distant crackle of fire and the rustling of debris. Riley crouched behind a rock formation, listening. The shadow moved closer, deliberately, circling the battlefield she had claimed. She held her fire, unwilling to reveal her position until she fully understood the threat. Then she saw him, or rather her. A lone figure emerged from the darkness, moving with the quiet confidence of a seasoned operator. Body lean, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the terrain. Riley recognized the movements immediately. Not insurgent, not local militia. Professional, trained, lethal. Riley exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in acknowledgement of the new challenge. This was no random enemy. It was someone who could match her, perhaps even outmatch her. Her pulse steadied, heart steady but alert. The SEALs were safe, but Riley's war had only evolved. The figure paused, scanning the terrain as if aware of her presence without confirmation. Riley mirrored the movements, staying hidden, weighing options, calculating probabilities. This was not a firefight she could charge into blindly. This was a duel of skill, intellect, and instinct. Suddenly, the figure moved again, closer, intentionally revealing part of their form in the moonlight. Riley noted details, tactical gear, rifle modifications, precision optics, everything bespoke elite training. Whoever this was, they had tracked her, likely studying the aftermath of the ambush, learning her patterns, her style. Her mind raced through contingencies. Any misstep could lead to an ambush, a trap, or a prolonged confrontation in which reinforcements would arrive too late. She adjusted her position, ensuring that if the figure attacked, she would have the advantage of terrain and concealment. And then a voice, calm but with steel beneath it, cut through the night. "You've made quite a mess down there," the figure said. Not a question, not a challenge, an observation. Riley recognized the voice's cadence immediately, trained, precise, confident. "I clean up better than most," Riley replied, keeping her voice neutral, controlled, hiding any edge of tension. A faint smile, or what could be seen as one in the dim moonlight, crossed the figure's face. "I can see that, but now the game changes." Riley tightened her grip on her rifle. The SEALs' lives were already secured, so the stakes now were personal, but just as deadly. Every instinct screamed that this was more than reconnaissance or observation. This was a challenge, a test, a fight in its own right. The figure moved closer again, stepping from shadow to shadow, tactical stance perfect, rifle at ready. Riley's finger hovered near the trigger, eyes locked on every motion, every flicker of movement, every indication of intent. The wind shifted, carrying dust and debris, masking sounds and obscuring vision. Riley knew that in this canyon, with its jagged cliffs and narrow corridors, one misstep could be fatal. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady but tense, guiding her awareness, sharpening her senses. The figure paused again, eyes catching hers across the rocky terrain. Riley recognized in that gaze the acknowledgement of skill, respect, and an unspoken challenge. A duel not just of firepower, but of wits, strategy, and nerve. Riley exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Then let's change the game," she said, voice calm, measured, betraying none of the tension surging beneath her skin. The figure tilted their head, a small gesture of recognition, almost a nod. Then, without warning, they moved silently, purposefully deeper into the canyon, vanishing into shadows that seemed almost alive. Riley remained in her position, watching, knowing that the battle had shifted, that survival required vigilance, and that even though she had saved lives today, the war was never truly over. She lowered her rifle slightly, scanning the horizon. The seals were safe, the valley cleared of immediate threats, but somewhere out there, a new enemy had entered the game. One who would challenge her in ways she hadn't yet encountered. And Riley knew, as she crouched atop the ridge, that the shadows of war would never release her. Her muscles relaxed slightly, but only briefly. Her eyes remained sharp, mind calculating, heart steady. The helicopter had taken the seals to safety, but Riley's path was still one of danger, vigilance, and relentless motion. The canyon stretched before her like an untamed beast, dark and silent under the moonlight, concealing threats and challenges yet unseen. Riley took a deep breath, savoring the rare clarity amidst chaos. She had survived the impossible, protected a team of elite warriors, and proven that one person's skill could turn the tide of war. And yet the presence of the shadow still out there reminded her, in the world she operated in, the fight never truly ended. There was always another threat, another ambush, another game, and Riley Hale was ready. She exhaled, moved carefully toward higher ground, blending with the shadows, preparing for whatever came next. The seals owed her their lives. The valley owed her nothing. And the shadow lurking in the darkness would soon learn that Riley Hale was more than a force to be reckoned with. She was a storm, precise, relentless, and unstoppable.